full of incredible sights, stories, and people. In fact, when you look around, there are some rather incredible people that live on this planet. Whether overcoming rare diseases or living a full life despite missing limbs, these following cases are definitely amazing and inspirational. Before we head off to show you these individuals, how about you show us some love by hitting those subscribe and notification buttons? It'll only take a second, and then you'll be sure to always be in the know when it comes to our newest and greatest video releases. Deepak Paswan. When you picture a typical person, what do you imagine? Probably someone with a head, face, 2 arms, 2 legs. That's pretty much the standard build of a human being. Now, if we tell you someone is born with 8 limbs, you may wonder how on earth that is possible. After all, a human with extra arms and legs is something usually reserved for comic books, movies, or even sci-fi thrillers. In India, however, a boy named Deepak Paswan was born with extra limbs. In fact, he had a grand total of 4 arms and 4 legs. When people looked at Deepak, it appeared as though there was another person stuck in his stomach. And in a way, there was. You see, he was born with a parasitic twin which resulted from a second fetus which didn't fully develop and fused with Deepak. Unsurprisingly, this octoboy was taunted and called names growing up. By the age of 8, doctors decided to operate on the boy and successfully removed the twin. Amazingly, Deepak now lives a completely normal life and even boasts that he can run faster than his older brothers. Qian Hongyan. From our story of a boy who was born with several extra limbs, we arrive at the case of an incredible little girl who ended up missing 2 of hers. Qian Hongyan was only 4 years old when she lost both of her legs in a car accident. Growing up in a poor rural area, she had to improvise when it came to dealing with her disability. Qian learned to walk using her hands. Interestingly, she also used a basketball on her lower body as a way to steady herself. In that area, she quickly became known as the basketball girl. When she was 10, Qian received artificial limbs to help her walk. However, this didn't stop her from pushing herself. A year later, she joined a local swim club and began training 4 hours a day. The hard work paid off, and Qian became a national champion in the Chinese National Paralympics swimming competition. In fact, for the last few years, Qian has won a number of medals and only narrowly missed out on making it to the 2012 London Paralympics. Indeed, this young woman's story of overcoming adversity is not only amazing, but makes many of our own obstacles seem pretty insignificant. Juliana Wetmore. One of the key things humans use to identify with other humans is their face. After all, we recognize people by their faces, look at their face when we talk, and stare into each other's eyes. From the minute she was born, Juliana Wetmore was up against a whole different challenge. You see, Juliana suffers from Treacher-Collins syndrome, which meant she was missing a lot of the bone structure in her face. In fact, she was missing 40% of her facial bones in total. The result was that Juliana didn't have a face, even though the rest of her body and brain were totally fine. In addition to the shock experienced by her parents, the cruelty of the outside world quickly showed itself with nasty messages, including one social media post saying Juliana should have been euthanized. Nonetheless, this little girl fought on. Now a teenager, Juliana has gone through 45 surgeries and will likely face more in the future. Despite all of this, she goes to school and communicates with friends and family by way of sign language. Bobby Martin. To an athlete, many of us assume you need to have a complete body in order to compete properly. Competitions such as the Paralympics have demonstrated that this is definitely not the case. But you may be wondering about a sport like football. After all, a player needs to be able to throw, catch, tackle, run, and block. All of this suggests that football is the kind of competition where you need all of your limbs in order to compete. Well, Bobby Martin would definitely disagree with you. Born with Kaldal regression syndrome, Martin has no body from the pelvis downwards. However, even without legs, he made the high school football team and left his mark on the field, often after tackling the opposition player. In addition to his disability, Martin also faced obstacles from officials when they tried to remove him from the game because he wasn't wearing the regulation cleats, thigh, and knee pads. Once everyone came to their senses, the 3-foot 1-inch player was allowed back on the field and ended his senior season with 48 tackles. Mandy Sellar. There's a good chance if you've spent any amount of time searching on the internet, you've seen a few images of Mandy Sellar. When she was born, doctors were immediately worried because her legs were 5 times the normal size. You see, Sellar suffered from a very rare genetic disorder which caused the skin, tissue, and bone in her lower extremities to grow abnormally. The result is that her upper body is proportionally normal while her legs are quite large. In fact, her legs and feet alone were estimated at one point to have weighed as much as 210 pounds. Several years ago, the growth of her legs led to an infection which required the partial amputation of her left leg. Amazingly, after the amputation, her left leg began to regrow at a rapid rate. Within 2 years of the operation, the leg had grown to a meter in girth and was nearly too large for her prosthetic limb. Not defeated, Sellar started taking trial drugs. Thankfully, the new drugs have seen her legs shrink down to around 150 pounds. While doctors are unsure how much her legs will shrink, Sellars has done what she always has and kept a very positive outlook. Time for our amazing quiz. Robert Wadlow is considered the tallest man to ever live. Do you know how tall he grew to be? We'll see if you're right after these next few entries. Jonathan Pitre. Our skin is our largest organ, and we're often told that we need to take care of it. That's why our parents always covered us in thick coatings of sunscreen in the summertime, and why they cleaned and bandaged our cuts when we fell down. The parents of Jonathan Pitre pay special attention to their son's skin because Jonathan suffers from a very rare condition. Born with epidermolysis bullosa, Jonathan has faced a life of pain and worry. That's because this disease causes his skin to blister and peel with the slightest amount of friction or contact. As you can imagine, having your skin blister and peel off with only a little contact is bad enough without also having to worry about potential infections. The added worry in Jonathan's case is that people with EB tend to develop aggressive skin cancer once they get into their 20s. As a result, this brave kid is currently undergoing risky stem cell transplants with the hope it will reverse his condition and allow him to lead a normal and healthy life. Mohammad Kaleem. Think of how much you rely on your hands to get through a typical day. After all, you need them to drive, type at the keyboard, pour a glass of milk, and even operate the controller for your PS4 or Xbox One. Generally, everyone's are the same. Sure, some people have really small hands, and others have large hands, but they all generally look and function the same. Then there's Mohammad Kaleem. This Indian boy has often been referred to as having the largest hands possessed by anyone in the world. It is believed this condition was brought about by a disorder known as macrodactyly. Nonetheless, as the years passed by, this little boy's hands continued to grow so big it made it hard for him to dress, feed, and generally take care of himself. As an added negative, the superstitious people of Muhammad's village taunted him and branded him as a devil child. It got so bad that he was even denied entry to the local school for fear he might scare the other children. Thankfully, he has recently started undergoing surgeries to reduce the size and increase the functionality of his hands. Claudio Viera de Oliveira. Imagine being born unable to move your head or limbs. Now imagine also seeing the world upside down because your head was positioned far different than anyone else. Incredibly, when Claudio Viera de Oliveira was born, the doctors advised his mother to simply let him pass away by starving him intentionally. This seemingly horrible medical advice stemmed from the fact that Claudio was not like any other normal baby. Born with arthrogryposis, this Brazilian's joints were fused together and his head was positioned upside down and facing backwards. Fortunately, Claudio's mother did not take the advice and she raised him despite his condition. As he grew, he realized he could write, type, and even operate a phone with his mouth. In the home, he moves around by walking on his knees. Travel outside is a lot harder, given Claudio can't use a wheelchair as a result of his body shape. Amazingly, he didn't let this hold him back from going to school and getting qualified as an accountant. Nonetheless, he maintains a high degree of independence and even undertakes work doing research, accounting, and occasional motivational speeches to students at his former school. Nick Vujicic. We've all been there at least once in our lives. Maybe it was during tryouts for a team, or perhaps it was while working a particularly tough job. We were talking about coming up against something we perceived as too hard or impossible, so we walked away or didn't try at all. Too often we simply hit snooze or decide to stay on the couch when various challenges arise. Not Nick Vujicic. Despite the fact that he has more reason than most to throw in the towel, this Australian is a fighter who doesn't let anything stop him from living his life. Vujicic was born with tetra amelia, which means he doesn't have two full arms and legs as most people. Instead, this 34-year-old only has two very small and deformed feet, which he uses for stability. Nonetheless, he graduated from a university, founded a non-profit organization, and became a motivational speaker. He also hasn't let his physical disability affect living a demanding physical life. This active lifestyle includes such activities as surfing and skydiving. That's pretty incredible considering many able-bodied people would never be brave enough to undertake such activities. Victoria Wright. We live in a world that puts a high value on how we look. In fact, when we think back to our years in school, appearance was often very important. After all, remember having to face your classmates with that massive zit? Ugh. Yikes. We bet Victoria Wright wishes her greatest challenge was the occasional bit of acne. You see, Wright was diagnosed with Cherubism as a child and has lived with all of the challenges brought forward by this disorder. In Wright's case, the disorder causes her jaw to dramatically grow over time. The results of this, in addition to obvious visual deformity, are increased pressure on her eyes and an overall increase in weight of her skull. In fact, doctors have stated that Wright's head has grown so much that it now weighs the same as a bowling ball. Obviously, growing up, this condition made things pretty tough. The English-born Wright has stated that she was teased, abused, and even called names, such as Buzz Lightyear. Nonetheless, she keeps a positive attitude and has avoided cosmetic surgery to make herself look more normal because she doesn't think you should have surgery to make others like you. So, any ideas how big American Robert Wadlow was at the peak of his height? The answer? 8 foot 11 inches. To put that in perspective, the tallest NBA player currently active is Detroit Pistons center Boban Marjanovic, who is 7 foot 3.5 inches tall. That's still more than a foot and a half shorter than Wadlow. Well, those are definitely some incredible and amazing people. That's all the time we have for now, but if you're still interested in seeing more unbelievable people, then be sure to check out all the other videos we have on offer here at The Richest. Just be sure, if you haven't already, to click that subscribe button before you head out the door. We'll definitely be seeing you around. Bye-bye for now.